Hello, and thank you for joining us here at the Anarchist Experience. My name is Robert, and I have a couple guests with me today. We've got Kenji, and is it Tompkins?
Yeah, Tompkins.
From, what is it, Red and Black
Red and Black Revolutionary on
Revolutionary.
YouTube.
Yeah. So if they want to check out your information, where should they go?
Just go to my YouTube channel, Red and Black Revolutionary, type that in the search bar, you'll get it, and then all of the other links and stuff are on that channel. So,
All right, and we're trying to get another person to join us from a different group. His name's James Rolfe, and hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. So,
oh, does he have any relation to the angry video game nerd?
not that I know of. I don't know. In any case, I guess the topic that I kind of wanted to bring up to discuss today was the idea that ANCAPs believe that people own the fruits of their labor, and ANCOMs don't. And that would be probably disagreed with by yourself, Jake, I would think, but I'd like to make a case for it. So,
All right.
if you
Well,
have a comment, go ahead.
oh yeah. Okay. So I just want to say that not all ANCOMs believe that. I mean, I think if they're being consistent, they should, but. There are some ANCOMs that have historically argued that it would be okay. So, for instance, both Kropotkin and Murray Bookchin, they were ANCOMs, and they said that it would be fine for people to own the fruits of their labor because people would voluntarily, contribute anyway. That was something historically argued by them. So not all ANCOMs believe that. Some of them, don't. Some of them would advocate that, and I've seen other ANCOMs as well advocating that labor is entitled to what it creates or whatever. But so it's not like an all-encompassing thing. Though a lot of ANCOMs will say that claim of you own what you produce is not legitimate. So it depends on the person. I think though, if you're going to be logically consistent and you're an ANCOM, you should probably think that that title of ownership would not be legitimate.
And on the same line, all ANCAPs don't believe in homesteading either. So, as I'm one of them.
Right, right. In fact, I think Jeffrey Tucker was kind of not so fond of the idea that you have to homestead something to claim ownership over it, and I do.
I actually think he disagrees with that from the sound of it. Just from that one question when you asked him when you relayed that question of the thief and who owned the stolen property, I think ownership only has one clear definition. That's the ability to exclude others from using the quote-unquote property.
Well, obviously, when it comes to the actual final say as to what ownership is in reality, might makes right in reality. That's just the way that the world works. If you have enough people with guns saying, yes, this person owns it, then in reality, he does own it. And as far as what's that?
Yeah, but you use just a loaded emotional term when you introduce the word right in that phrase. It implies morality. Ownership
Right.
has nothing to do with morality. So when if you watch the show again, Tucker, I think he made a deliberate effort to exclude from using that. What did he say? Might makes reality. I think he actually used reality in place of right. I think that was intentional, not by accident.
Oh, sure. And I think that we all have to kind of accept that as a fact. I mean, if the powers that are indicate that this person has final authority over something, that would be ownership. That they have the final deciding. Whatever they say happens with it happens, and that no one else can override that. Then that would be their ownership of it. And if there are a sufficient amount of guns that are pointed at various people to make sure that that happens and goes the way that it that the person's claiming it does, then they have ownership of it. Now, yes, I am making some sort of righteous claim that you own the fruits of your labor or should. So I'm making an ought claim, not an is claim. So when it comes to making an is claim, is there ownership of your fruits of your labor? Perhaps not. Being that we have people who will use force to require that you do not own the fruits of your labor. But I'm trying to make an ought claim, or actually it may not even just be an ought claim. It would be kind of along the lines of the metaphysics that you go into, Kenji, where a person who goes through the process of producing something and converting it from nothingness, essentially, into somethingness, has has manipulated matter in such a way that it is now something that didn't exist before, and therefore has the highest claim to it.
Sure. So you're making a normative claim versus a positive claim. Well, versus what we're making a positive and you're making a normative claim on what is property, right? Normative
Right.
in this normative
If you will.
using odds.
Right. And I suppose it is somewhat of a ought, but I mean it fits within the understanding that the only thing that we have to deal with when it comes to ownership is that we're dealing with different human beings that have decision-making capabilities. That we're talking about the choices that occur between two different choosers. You don't have to worry about the claim of ownership if you're dealing with a rock. A rock can't make you not own something. But a actor who has the ability to choose to make decisions can make those choices and makes an influence upon whether or not your choices are actualized or if their choices are actualized, and they're competing for dominance over what happens in this particular instance. Whether it be that I own this fishing pole, I made it, it's my fishing pole. Now this is a claim, it's a positive assertion that says this is mine, and then you have to go about backing that up, I guess, with force. But what I'm trying to suggest is that we should have a societal norm which would indicate that the majority of the society or that as many people as possible would respect that claim and be willing to back that claim if someone comes along with violence and says, no, I'm going to take ownership of that and make it mine.
Yeah, I have a slight difference of opinion. Again, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but it'll come down to self-interest, whether you should or should not maintain something as your property or not. I believe there are natural laws using just the self-interest principle and profitability. If it's profitable for you to exclude others from using it and maintain exclusivity with it, then you should maintain its property. That it's self-interest either way. Anyway, any action any individual does should be determined by self-interest. Otherwise, again, you will be punished through your existence as far as existing.
Okay. Um, what do you think about that, Jake?
I mean, well, I would like to start by talking about ownership and what you guys were talking about before. I don't see ownership as something that's backed by force. Well, I see in some way it is, but I don't see ownership as something that necessarily is enforced on people. Like instead of like it being social norms, it's completely like I don't think that you can just back an ownership claim with guns. Like I don't think that that's correct, because number one, ownership claims are they're about they're basically ought claims that are backed by I don't know, like like facts. Like so, basically, uh, ownership, in my view, is a right. Like so, if you look at the etymology of the word ownership in all of its forms, it's supposed to denote certain rights of control over something. So, like he was talking about certain rights of exclusion.
Can Jake, before you go any further, could you give a definition of what a right is in the way you're using it?
Well, like so, it's access to something that's guaranteed. I think that's a good way of putting
Okay.
it. Like socially reinforced and stuff. So,
Okay. But isn't that saying that socially we enforce? Wouldn't that then imply force, which
yeah,
is
but I'm not talking about like I know that you need to enforce social rules, but I'm saying there needs to be, and what I was going to go on to say was there needs to be social norms that back up things that are enforced. You can't just enforce something with guns because no matter how much violence you want to inflict, there's still the opportunity for people to overcome that violence. So say for example, if everyone in the world just stopped working right now, right? So like we decided we had enough, we didn't want to work anymore, and then what are the people that want us to work going to do? Like they're going to shoot like 75,000 people, and it doesn't make sense. There needs to be social cooperation that goes into kind of maintaining ownership. Otherwise, there is no, because it's a social convention anyway, and you can't really do anything without social limitations that are accepted. So like it needs it's more than just something that I enforce with guns or whatever.
Could
It's
we
more than that.
Yeah, could we just have a moment of clarity as far as the definition of ownership? Can we all agree to the definition of ownership as the ability to exclude others from using whatever the thing is
I
instead of
think
so it doesn't necessarily so just because I bring that up, it doesn't use the term guns. It's kind of an emotionally charged term. It doesn't need to be guns.
well, I'm talking about like physical force.
Yeah, just the power to exclude others from using it. Would that be agreeable with everybody to use? As
So
far as
kind of like
That
how
is
you
one of the definitions. I don't think that that's the definition, though. I think that's one of.
definitions are arbitrary, so as long as we all agree to it,
I don't
we
agree
can.
with that either.
so by that you mean how you can exclude somebody from living in your house or something like that.
Yeah, then that would be ownership. That would be. I mean, it's just a technical thing. I mean,
I mean, like I'll agree with it for the sake of arguments. We don't have to have a semantic.
yeah,
And I would actually say that it would be final authority in the use of or decision making of it, meaning that it's
but
not only
that
the right to exclude others for their whatever their choices would be for the use of whatever it is, but it is also the ability to use it in the fashion that you see fit. Um, you know, however that may be. You can destroy it, you can manipulate it, you can do all sorts of things that you want to it, whatever it is that you are claiming ownership over, and no one
I
could interfere with that activity unless there is some sort of other group that unless there's something else being affected in the process. So if I claim ownership over my I don't know baseball bat, nobody else can tell me that I can't use my baseball bat to do whatever the hell I want with my baseball bat. Unless I'm taking my baseball bat and hitting something else that is somebody else's. And then I'm manipulating their something and denying them ownership over that.
I think it would
yeah
be efficient though to just agree to like the definition that Kinsey laid out for the sake of the argument. So like don't
yeah
you don't
because
have to accept it yourself, but just like for the sake of
Oh,
argument.
sure.
yeah for the sake of argument you can it's arbitrary, right? But you by introducing the utility portion of owner into the definition of ownership, you complicate the matter. So there's a scale of utilizing something too. I mean, someone may be able to utilize something better than others. I think the excludability criteria is the only criteria you need. Uh, as far as utilization, that's kind of secondary. But
Okay.
for Jake, like Jake said, it's really for the purpose of proceeding with the argument.
Yeah, that's fine.
So there's no conflation.
Right.
Okay, just power the ability to exclude others from using it.
Right. Okay. So we're
Okay, so yeah, Jake, you mentioned like ownership should be a social burden, meaning that.
I didn't
So
say
I
it
believe.
should- I said I didn't say it should be. I said it is.
he's saying that it is
Should
as a
Like I'm saying
should
that if you're going to have an ownership claim, like so, and even by the definition that you gave me, it's going to need to be socially enforced. Otherwise, you don't have an ownership claim.
yeah, I agree with that. It's actually another form. Well, not necessarily. Well, I kind of agree with that. It's
Like
ownership can be outsourced. Like for instance, if I can't protect my house, I can pay someone else for me. Or if I have a contract with society, if there's a government and there's laws, that's in essence a contract with society to
yeah,
protect it
but
for
there
me.
has to be social cooperation that goes into making that contract viable. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to occupy that house in the way that it denotes ownership. Like so, like people could, in theory, fuck up your ability to, exclude them from using it in some capacity. So like it needs to be like there needs to be social cooperation to do anything, much less yeah, like own something. So like unless
No,
like
maybe I should add.
it claims with like just force, like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, maybe I should add in the definition that not only do you have to have the ability to exclude others, but you have to have the will, and you have to actually have to execute it, right?
Okay.
Excluding others. So if you own this house, that implies that I'm both willing, able, and I am excluding others from using it.
Okay.
So if I do own the house and I don't need anyone's help, well, if you look at it from a self-interested point of view, right? In order for someone to try to take ownership of my house while I have current ownership, in essence, they would have to have a utility over the cost of trying to take it from me. Right?
Uh-huh.
Naturally, defense would be cheaper than aggression. So,
I don't necessarily agree with that.
all things equal.
I don't agree with that necessarily.
Yeah,
I think we can debate that. So.
I think
Okay.
even in ANCAP perspective, though, and I don't know why ANCAP say that, because I think even from their perspective, we can just look at the current system and say, oh, well, here are, situations where aggression has been, a lot more profitable than defense of just property titles.
Now, when I say aggression, when I'm speaking of these kind of natural laws, I'm talking as with no government. So it
Yeah.
kind of implies that in an ANCAP.
Well,
How do you say the ANCAP utopia? What is it called?
In
I forgot.
Capistan?
Yeah, ANCAPistan. In ANCAPistan. That's what I'm talking about with these normal laws. With no
Well-
external government
Mhm.
intervention, defense would be cheaper than aggression.
right.
No, you're wrong.
Well, I don't necessarily agree.
All things equal.
All things being equal, you're wrong.
So like, but I want to like as a side note say that I don't know why ANCAP say ANCAPistan because like, I mean this is a kind of semantic thing, but that was meant as like an insult to you guys. Like I don't know why you guys use it. Like I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it's kind of a rude thing to do, but like, it's meant as an insult to ANCAPs. It's not meant as like
Well, I
actual
understand,
description.
and I don't
Like,
care.
just say
But
ANCAP society, and then that fixes the problem.
yeah, I understand where it came from. I don't care. It actually serves a purpose as far as me talking. When I say ANCAPistan, instead of saying in an ideal and anarcho-capitalist society, instead of saying that all the time,
Right.
ANCAPistan actually kind of rolls off the tongue easier. So
Yeah, it
Well,
makes
part
it
of utility.
easy to
ANCAP
say.
society, but like my point is like it's kind of like you're adopting. I mean, I guess
like I don't care the historical. I know it's a derogatory thing. You guys.
Like,
with
I can understand if like you guys had made this thing where it's like, okay, we're gonna take ANCAPistan for ourselves and then throw
if
it back.
someone suggests something that rolls off the tongue easy, I'll gladly use it. But ANCAPistan works for me.
We don't need to get into a debate about that. So I'll just.
You're the one debating, not me.
I know. No, I know. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying, like, we don't need to get into a debate about that, so I'll stop.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. What you're saying is that that aggression is more expensive, or did you say it's harder
Oh.
than defense?
I think he
More
said that
expensive
deeper.
in a self-interested point of view, as far as let's say there's some type of there's blanking on that word.
Well,
But
let me
go ahead.
clarify why I'm disagreeing with you. All right.
Mhm.
Let's say that there is a person who has something that I want.
Again, all things equal. So
I understand. There is a person that has something that I want.
What does that mean, though? What does all things equal mean?
That that both sides would have the equal amount of force available to them.
I don't think that's the real world at all.
No.
But okay.
no, you have to understand. Real world is just changing some variables. So yes, you can change the variables, but
I mean, yeah, maybe we're going to
you
go
have to you have to analyze things from an abstract point of view, right? So you cannot analyze a complex scenario if you can't analyze the most simplest. So you must start from this
From
point
the
of view.
simple.
But is
Yeah,
it an ethical abstraction? So are we doing like just an ethical experiment, or is it like, are we actually trying to apply these principles to the world as it exists? I think that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, but to understand.
By boiling it down to the smallest minute component, you can then use those rules and those understandings in order to build up to more complex things
So
like in society.
it's an ethical abstraction. So like if we're alone on a boat or whatever, that kind of thing.
Potentially. The example that I was going to give is that if you have a person who, let's say that we live in a large community, right, that's fine. Well, if we live in a large community and there is a situation where there is a person who is currently not within view of the rest of the community and they want to be aggressive towards another person who is also not currently in view of the rest of the community and take their whatever it is that they want by using violence, the initiation of the violence, the aggression, is very easy. It's very simple. You just kill the person and take their stuff. All right? The defense against that is a very difficult task. Trying to prevent someone from taking your stuff is, they get to fire first.
Not shoot the guy who's trying to shoot you, and then
yeah, you're already dead. You can't shoot.
It turned on its head, so that it's just as simple as the killing. Like, it doesn't like in your example, defense. In this abstract example, defense is not any harder than shooting somebody because by the rules that you've laid out, I could flip that on its head and be like, all right, well, you just shoot the guy who's trying to shoot you, and then it's done. It's over with.
No, let me get to it. So all things being equal, let's just for the sake of intensive purposes, let's say the act of actually defending versus aggressing. So are you shooting me versus me trying to stop you from shooting me? Let's just say the costs are equal, right there. Okay, we're not considering the benefits. No, let's just assume, just for the sake of debate. So here's where the tiebreaker is. Is in reputation, right? So let's say I'm a net. So another natural law I'd like to introduce is that cooperation is the natural tendency of people. Okay, we can debate that a little later, but just to accept it for now, so I can proceed with the argument.
I want to get something though, cleared up though, because I don't think anybody really cleared it up for me. Is this? Are we talking about in the scenario in our world where the laws
No, I'm not trying to analyze.
Or is it an ethical abstraction?
An ethical abstraction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're always going to use an ethical abstraction and then move from that towards real life.
Yeah, that's the best way to understand things, right? You build a solid foundation before you don't build a house of cards with some cracked foundation and try to build from there and have to come back to it.
I agree to that, but I don't think it's needs to be in every conversation. For example, we've all so if I get into a conversation with a typical person about ethics and about something that's obvious to a lot of people have already done those ethical abstractions and gotten to those points, so we can have a more in-depth conversation with more.
You can't have an in-depth conversation if you haven't clarified.
if you want to like go from the ethical abstraction, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm just saying it doesn't need to be in every conversation.
It doesn't need to be in every conversation, but it needs to be in a conversation.
Right. I would agree with that. Yeah.
So I've never debated you yet, so I think this is the best time, right?
Right.
Okay.
I suppose.
All right. So your claim is that because of a reputation component, that by being an aggressor, you have an an added cost that a defender does not, and
Yes.
therefore, being a defender is less costly.
That's
than being
even
an aggressor.
Yeah, and that's even assuming, which it probably isn't, that all the other costs are the same, right? So I'm just picking out one thing, all else being equal, on top of all else being equal, that the ultimate tiebreaker is, right? Reputation. But ultimately, defense is cheaper, right? Because I know my home territory more than the intruder knows of mine. In most, that's the natural tendency, right? It's not a guarantee, but it is a tendency.
You're still wrong.
A tendency, not a guarantee.
No, but you're still wrong.
Okay.
Right? The aggressor has the first move, and the first move can be deadly. Therefore, the aggressor has the superior position.
You have to counterweigh that with
A defender by its nature must react to an aggressor. It cannot act first.
Sure, I agree that, but that doesn't overcome the home field advantage. And naturally too, you can go even further.
Okay.
So
But
you can go even further that it's more expensive, right?
Wait, Kenji, you said all things being equal, okay, and you're adding in something that's inequality. You're changing by adding in inequality.
I said all else being equal.
All right, and then all else being equal
So
would
you're
indicate
changing
that
one
the
of those all
aggressor
else.
has the home field knowledge that you do, if they're both equal.
Yeah.
So you can't add that in and then use it as a justification that the aggressor has a disadvantage, all right? Both of them have reputations, yes, okay, that's fine. Both of them have an understanding of the terrain, that's fine. But you can't have home field advantage and not have all things being equal. They're not all equal if you have home field advantage, for one.
No. You see, I'm moving step by step.
Yeah, but
changing one variable.
Wrong.
So making your first move on an unknown territory.
Both sides are unknown.
Right. You walk into my house to try to kill me. You don't know where my guns are. You don't know what defensive preps I've made. Right.
I see.
You may have an initial incentive to do something, but ultimately the knowledge of the terrain is mine.
If I may jump in.
That's debatable. That can be debatable, but
if I may jump in, was the crux of the discussion, or the foundation that you laid? I guess that could be a crux as well, but whatever. Wasn't the foundation that you guys made before you started with the ethical abstraction? Wasn't that all sides equal? So if all sides are equal,
all else equal.
Right.
Yeah, right. I get. Yeah, okay. But so if all else is equal, then that means that both sides have an equal.
No, I intentionally moved.
Nobody has an actual advantage because all sides have equal opportunity.
No, it's like this. When I say all else equal, so I usually look at one variable and analyze it, and I say all else equal, right? That's science, right?
Yeah, right.
You have to look at one variable, hold else.
What does that mean, though? I've never encountered that in my life. So
science?
No, not science. Obviously, not science.
Obviously, it's not apparent because you don't even know what this whole all else constant. That's the essence of science. It's the essence of.
I've not run into that specific saying. If it's so common.
Controlled experiment. Have you ever heard of controlled experiment?
Yeah, it's just an attempt to isolate what it is that you're trying to analyze, so that you're not conflating it with other things that may also.
I haven't heard it by that definition, or not that definition, that wording. I've never heard that phrase for that. I've heard controlled experiment, but not all else equal. So.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah.
It's the same meaning. It's just kind of economics. They use ceteris paribus, all else equal. Same thing. I mean. you should be able to link the two. They're the same meanings. Hold all other variables.
But let's go ahead and move on here. Okay, now I'm going to say that you're wrong. That the home field advantage thing is a false creation. That it but if you're talking about a person who is set up to defend against something, if they are planning ahead in order to set up stuff, I would refer you to the Maginot Line. It's not that hard to figure out where the weak spot is for an opponent. Hell, even Sid Meier's as a
again that all that information will add to your cost.
Right, but if you're going to try to defend against an aggressor, you have to prepare for all contingencies and win all contingencies.
Yeah, that costs. The more contingencies,
they only have to find one hole and win in that one case. All right, defending is much more expensive and much more difficult than aggressing.
Okay, so the thing we assumed, the premise we assumed is that defense is from the owner. Right? So the owner is privy to information about the property itself, and that initial aggression will have to overcome that. And I think that's debatable. I mean, we should drop that part for now. I'll concede that as debatable. But I really think that still that home field knowledge, the advantage of the properties, how to defend it. I can actually take steps before you to defend your aggression, right? So who's really taking the initial step there? Is it me preparing for your aggression anytime? So that's debatable. So it kind of gets fuzzy there. That I don't want to get into. I mean, that's kind of like that'll take the show. Yeah,
fine, move on. Move on. Let's go to the next thing.
But if you agree with me, as far as reputation is concerned, right? All else equal. Here's the thing. All else equal, people will tend to cooperate. Right? People's cooperation is an asset to someone. That's proven mathematically by comparative advantage.
Okay. Well, I think we can all agree that if there was an aggressor within our community, that we would look at that aggressor in a negative light. And if there was someone who was defending themselves in our community, we would not have a negative light towards them.
I think that heavily depends, though. Like, so given like the social situations, like I'm sure you've seen all of the statists, as you call them, lining up to take welfare checks, and you view that as aggression. So like it depends on the social norms. Like an aggressor could be acceptable.
Jake, sorry, I have to interrupt you there. ANCAP certainly do not think of the people who are collecting welfare checks to be aggressors.
A lot of ANCAPs would disagree with you on that. I've seen them actually saying things like people who get benefits from unions are like evil because they get money taken away by force.
And they're shit caps because they're not ANCAPs. Okay, ANCAPs are against the state stealing people's money, and then if people are the recipients of that, they're playing by the game that the government created, and no one can hold blame against them for having.
I don't think so. I think that's
available.
Speaking from an ANCAP, I actually like people who take government benefits or any government benefit, but that's another topic I can get into.
I mean, well,
there's differences of opinion as far as
that debate, though. Not to get into that debate, whatever. Yeah. Fine, I'll abide by that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'll abide by that. So, like, just for example, there are a bunch of statists. They advocate the state. They, some of them are part of the state apparatus, which in your case you would think that that's bad, immoral. And they're looked at as good people by society, or they're looked at as, legitimate. Their position is looked at as legitimate. That aggressive institution, for your conception, is looked at as illegitimate. So it depends on the social norms. We're not going to look at aggressors, as evil spawn of Satan all the time.
Yeah. Well, as I again use, I think
he's got a point here, Kenji. Now,
he's got a point, but it's kind of like subjective valuation. His whole statement relies on subjective valuation, right? Objectively, good and bad are poorly defined.
All he's saying is that the cultural norms will have a factor or bear bear into the determination as to whether reputation will be harmed or benefited from an action. Now, if you have, let's say, for example, a person who is starving to death and they want to feed their children, and they are an aggressor, and they go in and steal food from a baker, let's say, for example, all right? Now, the society as a whole, we may find that the baker, has been wronged in some way, but we may not point at the aggressor and say, you know what, that's not acceptable. If we're going to say, yeah, that's not acceptable. You're trying to feed your children. Nobody's going to say that. All right, so then the response is going to be something along the lines of, well, we as a community have somehow failed this family, and we need to help him be able to have opportunities such that his family is fed, and we will work together in some fashion. Now, this is where Ann Capps would say we start to go into some sort of charity work and so on, and that would include paying to the baker for the stolen food.
Sure, but I agree. Let's get one thing straight. I agree. There's some conclusions I've come up when I've come up with my self-interest, when I've built my beliefs on self-interest, right? So one of my beliefs, and it's kind of logically, it's mathematical. It's a mathematical conclusion that if I define immoral and if I define immoral bad as against one's self-interest, you come to the conclusion that immoral things are not sustainable, right? So any of these subjective societal valuations on what moral is, what morality is, bad thing. I mean, things that are not objectively true as far as self-interest will tend not to be sustainable. So any of these dependent things on societal's judgment, any bad ones, any ones that kind of differ from self-interest, that deviate from self-interest, will not be sustainable.
So you're saying altruism isn't sustainable? Any form of altruistic behavior?
No. There's an overlap of altruism and self-interest, right? It's not in my self-interest.
On that point.
Again, comparative advantage. Do you guys understand comparative advantage? It proves.
I get the concepts that you're talking about, but I don't agree with it at all. I think it's
mathematical, right? So
it's not mathematical at all.
It's mathematical, because
no.
Yeah, it's mathematical.
Can
I explain?
All right.
The idea that
apparently you don't understand comparative advantage. If you don't understand mathematics.
If you keep asserting something is mathematical and somebody's disagreeing, I'm
offering to explain it too. So
right.
You're going to criticize me for that.
But the point that you're saying is that if you take an action and it is actually going to be beneficial towards continuing your line, yourself, or your memes, then it is moral, and that if you take an action that is detrimental to yourself, your progeny, or your memes, that it is immoral.
That's extremely weird, though, because any action is going to have benefits and things that aren't detriments. So there's nothing that's universally in accordance with self-interest, and nothing that is universally detrimental. It's just that that's extremely weird and unworkable.
I'm not claiming that. I'm not. Don't misinterpret what I say.
I mean, I'm not saying that was anybody's argument. I'm just saying
it seems like you're saying.
Well, no, I mean.
I don't know why you're bringing it up if no one's well.
I mean, did you have any problem with what I said? What you were saying about self-interest?
I want to get back to comparative advantage, though.
So what is comparative advantage and what is self-interest, the way you're defining it?
Do you understand comparative advantage? I mean, do you know the possibility that considering the production of any two goods between two individuals, the probability that the relative rate of production between those two goods are the same between two individuals? I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to get too technical, but it's mathematical. Trust me, I'm not overusing the term mathematical here. My training's in math. So.
This is a huge problem, though. If you're trying to explain things to people, you shouldn't go off.
I didn't even I didn't even get 20% of the explanation away. So
Yeah, but I'm already stopping you because
okay.
you're using like unattainable language for most people. Like I don't know what you're saying.
I
and
know that's why I stopped there, so I can allow you to ask questions so I can
And I
clarify.
know what a lot of those terms mean. It just seems like, but the way you've presented it is like a jumbled mess. So like, and that's what I'm trying to like.
I'm not trying to obfuscate.
You can use the technical terms, but you have to use them in
That's why I stopped. So you can
Also, saying something's mathematical doesn't mean anything really in regards to what we ought to do. It's like it's mathematical to build a nuclear bomb that can blow up the entire planet. It's so what if it's mathematical? That doesn't mean that we ought to do it. There's math behind just many things that are positive or negative in regards to
I can argue there's
goals.
math behind everything. So, but
Right. So why does it being mathematical mean anything then?
Because that's the ultimate logic, right? That's logic. That's logic using quantitative definition, right? So
but you just said there's math behind everything. So how does that being mathematical prove anything? It's irrelevant then.
Yeah,
if you're in a logical discussion,
not necessary.
So when I say it's mathematical conclusion, that means a strong logical conclusion. You cannot argue with that.
That comparative advantage leads to what? What's your conclusion? That it leads to well-being of people?
First of all,
what are you trying to say? I'm just saying you're saying comparative advantage is good. I'm guessing, and I'm not sure what you're defining as that good. What is that
good or bad?
I asked him to define comparative advantage and self-interest and how that all relates. So like that's where we were at. And so like he'll probably explain that within that explanation, and we'll all be clear on that.
I would hope so.
Yeah, it's just the problem is the technical when I use technical use technical jargon from economics, it's actually the best language. So it's kind of habit. But I stop in order for you to ask me questions about any technical jargon.
Okay, then let me ask you this question because I know what those words mean. So basically, what I got from that, and I might be misinterpreting because I do that sometimes.
I'm not sure you do. I wouldn't be so sure you understand comparative advantage. Especially if you don't understand it mathematically.
Comparative advantage. I'm not denoting any knowledge about comparative advantage. I'm saying that I know the terms that you use.
You've heard them before, right? But you don't necessarily understand them.
No, I mean you're making a lot of assumptions, but so I know what
I'm making assumptions from what I hear.
Production means. I know what all that means. So like what I got from that is that the production of two goods between, I guess entering into an exchange between two people is equal. Like that's comparative advantage from what I've heard. I could be mixing up your words though.
Comparative advantage incentivizes cost efficiency as a mechanism to maximize profit, and with cost efficiency, one is trying to pretty much cut corners, and that can lead to horrible externalities in regards. I
don't know where you got this communist definition.
All right.
Well, you're talking about comparative advantage. Comparative advantage.
Well, where are you reading? Are you reading this off a communist site? I'm guessing that's it.
No, I'm not reading it off of a communist.
Where are you reading it from?
I'm not reading it off
a journalist site.
No, I know I'm not reading it. I'm just saying that comparative advantage uses cost efficiency as a mechanism within that as a way to maximize profit, and cost efficiency.
There's a whole bunch of badly defined terms.
Let's talk about cost efficiency and what that's at the expense at, because there's this assumption within Austrian economists and so-called philosophical capitalists that cost efficiency equals resource efficiency. But what we have with cost efficiency is we have a proxy for measuring resources that it's not resources itself. And cost efficiency will sacrifice resource efficiency and technological efficiency, which is actually technically possible at every single stage of production, as well as at the expense of human needs at every stage of production, to the extent that you can use that to maximize profit.
Can I ask you a quick?
Okay, wait. I'm gonna jump in here and clarify something for what we're dealing with. All right, Kenshi, you're talking about comparative advantage in the sense that the two end results, whatever they happen to be, are equal. That we are both going to produce, let's say, a table. All right, and this table is made of these same materials. All the materials that are in the table are the same. All the functionality of the table, the physical appearance, and everything is exactly the same as the result. But what the comparative advantage is that all the inputs that went into the making of that table had more costs or less costs, and if it had less costs, if it was easier to make, or if it used less wood, or if it used less oil, or whatever sort of things that we went into the production of it, it is comparatively advantageous for us to use the one method, which is less wasteful than the other. Right?
It's also comparatively advantageous to use the state as a mechanism to maximize profit through rigging the market based on the varying incentive system within the market, which is to maximize profit. So a great way for comparative advantage is to create a state or to use a state to maximize profit. And that's one of the issues with the moral imposition of no state onto a market system.
All right, Hagbard, I'm going to have to...
That, though,
yeah.
I want to point something out, though. The way Robert just explained that, like...
That wasn't it.
Way better. That was way better than anything. You used terms, and I know what those terms mean, like, despite what you think, and you use them, like, completely weirdly. And Robert explained it in a way that I could understand, and you explained it in a way that
wasn't comparative.
I explained it wrong.
Basically, through, words together that, I don't even know if you knew what those mean.
No, trust me. Trust me.
Okay, but Kenji, you're needing to explain it in the thing. All right, so let's go through a couple of ground.
I don't do this. I'm not a professor. I'm not a.
Right.
So I don't do this every day.
I'm going to set some ground rules here. All right, and we're going to follow them. All right. So number one, Hagbard, when we're talking about some subject, going off into how capitalism is evil and all that other stuff, really doesn't help the conversation. I'd like to stay on topic. So then let's work through whatever topic it is that we're working on, and not go off onto the, how the state does this or blah, 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 any of that stuff. All right, well, let's work within the topic. Number two, Kenji, be brief, be concise, don't pause, give us your explanation, and then we'll ask questions if we want to. All right?
I always try to be brief. That's the ultimate goal of a
mathematician. Finish your explanation as to what it is you're talking about.
Jumbled nonsense.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. Again, when I pause, I'm trying to search.
You have the floor. We do not want you to pause. We do not want you to do anything other than explain.
But when I pause, I'm trying to search for the best word.
All right.
So if you rush me, it's going to get you.
Don't pause for our purposes. Just tell it what the way.
Well, Jake is requesting I don't use terminology that he's not familiar with.
Where was my definition?
Well, I was just trying to say
okay,
that.
I'll follow you, Robert. Okay.
He wasn't saying that don't. What Robert is trying to say is that don't make preemptive pauses because you think we might benefit. Wait for us to interrupt you.
You were just complaining about the terminology I use.
That has no bearing on what I'm explaining right now.
Yeah, because that's why I was pausing. I'm trying not to use it.
What are you talking about? What I'm saying to you is that Robert means don't assume that we need a pause and then pause for the sake of the conversation. Let us ask the questions.
The only reason is because I'm scared
I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to attack you for that. I'm just saying this is what Robert is saying. I'm trying to clear it up.
You're attacking me for one thing and complaining about the same.
I'm not attacking, dude.
All right.
Did you not just complain about
what Robert was saying?
But Jake, let me ask Jake a question. Jake, did you not criticize me about the terminology it was too?
Yes, but there's no bearing on what I was just talking about, dude.
You were just criticized for me for pausing, and I told you I was pausing.
Just stop.
To search for better words.
It doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant.
That's why I was going to follow your directive, Robert.
Okay. So, what is it that you mean when you say comparative advantage? What does that mean?
It's okay. Comparative advantage when considering production of two goods, the rate, right? So I can produce, let's say, a rate of product X at this rate per hour. I can produce product Y at this rate per hour, right? You can compare the relative costs to each other.
So that means that based on how quickly you produce each product, which one would be more profitable over a certain extent of time?
No, you can see the production cost of one good relative to the other. So
that's what I said. That is what I said. Now, the inputs, it can include time. All right? If it takes more time for you to produce a pair of boots, and I can produce the same boots with less time, the inputs are less and the waste is less. Therefore, I have comparative advantage in my production of boots compared to yours.
No,
so this
that's
is in
that's
this is in
absolute.
respect to
That's absolute advantage.
cost rather than
That's absolute advantage.
profits.
That's absolute advantage, right?
And also, Robert, the waste isn't necessarily minimized if you do it in less time.
This is relative to one other good.
Right.
There's a fine distinction there, Robert. A fine one.
Fine.
Okay. So the distinction is what?
Relative cost
Okay.
versus
So,
absolute cost.
all right. Relative cost being what?
Right, so I can have an absolute advantage in both goods, but the comparative advantage must lie with one or the other. That's the difference. And see, this is very abstract. It's mathematically abstract. That's why I know you guys don't understand it.
Well, no, we do. It takes cost efficiency.
Instead of going on about how we don't understand it, explain it.
Wait, Kenji, it involves cost efficiency as a mechanism, correct? Involved in your whole description.
No, relative cost.
Right.
There are different types of costs. So relative cost is the good in terms of
it might be cost efficient to destroy the entire ecosystem, and to destroy forests to have grass-fed cattle.
No, I mean trade-off. If all plants die, can you live?
No, but I'm saying it might be cost efficient to do ecocidal things. It could be cost efficient to kill cows and then sell them to people, correct?
If all I care about is self-interest, that ultimately comes into my calculation. So I don't understand why you're trying to make it worthless.
I have another question, Kenshi. Would corporate subsidy or would subsidies from a state help somebody with comparative advantage towards somebody else?
Subsidies from the state have dead weight loss, so it's a frictional loss. So net weight, it's bad for the average individual, right? Unless
I'm not saying that it is or isn't. I'm saying, isn't it possible that you can use the state as a mechanism to maintain comparative advantage over somebody else by rigging the market in a certain way, correct?
You're confusing comparative advantage with absolute advantage. Right.
I don't know if I am. I'm saying that isn't one way to have relative advantage? I have a question. Isn't one way to have relative advantage over somebody else?
Robert would like silence in the church, please.
All right. We're dropping the subject. It's too whatever. You need to work on how it is you're going to explain these things, Kenshi. Because
look it up.
Okay.
Wikipedia.
I just did.
I'm not looking anything up. We're moving on to a different topic. We're just going to go ahead and drop this topic, and we're going to move on to a different one.
Oh,
all right?
Please do.
All right. Now, I'm going to bring it open to Hagbard. I know that you've got a topic probably on your mind. So, what is it?
The topic on my mind, it actually has to do with comparative advantage. It's just that what is a mechanism to maintain relative advantage over people? It could be something positive, but it could also be something negative. And I think we should always look at both sides of profit maximization. We should look at the extent to which profit maximization can help people to a certain degree, and the extent to which it can harm people. Yeah. I think it does extreme amounts of harm based on the overall incentive system, though. But my basic question is, it goes back to that question about the state. One mechanism, and an essential mechanism for maintaining comparative advantage over somebody else, would be to use the state to punish competitors and to help you. So you can
use the state to make a communist society, right?
No, I don't think you can at all, because I think communism is defined by a stateless, moneyless, classless society, and the idea that we can use the state to create a communist society is just as insane to me as the idea that we can use capitalism to achieve a communist society.
I think we all here agree that we're against the state, so I don't understand why you introducing.
Right. I get that you're against the state. My issue is that within the market and within comparative advantage, there's an incentive system to either create a state or to use a state to maximize profit and power.
When you introduce the state into any system, it'll corrupt it, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a quote-unquote Anarcho-Capitalism or communism. And
I agree that the state is a negative entity, but that's not my basic point. Has to deal with the fact that using the state is a great way to maximize profit and power. So the market system has a certain incentive system to create a state if there isn't one.
Okay, let me make this statement. Without the state, a free market is better than a communist system. Okay, so criticize that, please.
All right, that's your claim, and
I
I will agree
don't
with
know
it.
what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's
But-
just a claim. Now criticize it. I'd like Hagberg to criticize it without trying to introduce using the state for
You
something.
made a claim. You didn't have any evidence, so I don't know what to
No,
say to
no,
it.
that's why
What's your evidence? Do you have any evidence? Because you made a claim.
yeah,
I mean,
comparative advantage. There you go.
All right,
right. Okay. So what
But
I'm
that's
saying,
going into
anarchist.
something else.
Prove a point, but you're not proving it well. Like you're just shouting.
No,
random
no,
stuff,
Hagberg is forcing free markets to use the state, right?
All right.
His criticism is always based on using
I'm
the
saying
state.
that. I'm saying
no,
that.
you weren't
Well,
listening.
right now I'm in Anarcho-Capitalism.
All right.
I'm
So
using comparative advantage.
let me
to
argue
show-
this one. Can't you let me argue this one? All right. Hagberg. All right. So let's say that we've got the ANCOM paradise that we would like to see. All right. We've
Yeah.
accepted that there is no government. There is no hierarchical structures that have dominance over, one person has dominance over another. We're all working together and we're doing our thing. And we're finding that things are going along at kind of a not so fast rate. We're not producing anything that is expanding the society in a technological way in a very quick fashion. We're kind of stagnating.
Why?
I'm just saying. Let's say for sake of argument that that's going on. All right.
Mhm.
Now, if someone came along and said, "All right, I've got a plan on how we should do these things, but I'm going to ask that you give me your trust to go ahead and run this particular section over here, and I'll be in charge." All right? And the consensus ends up being that, yeah, we're going to give it a try because we want to. All right? So the person now is given, through consensus, that the societal norm will be that this person is now in charge of this particular section of doing stuff. Right?
I have a
And-
question in regards to the relationship of that authority to everybody else. Do the other people maintain their decision-making power to get outside of that relationship at any time?
Oh, they can always opt out. They can always go back into.
And can they maintain their decision-making power within the relationship, or the only way to relate is through dominance?
Okay, let's say that he's making a movie. All right, he's the director of the movie. If he says that you're going to wear these particular clothes or speak these particular lines, you're going to say them and wear the clothes. Or you can say, you know what, I don't want to be part of this movie, and he can get somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in that particular case, he has a hierarchical authority that is kind of unnerving in an ANCOM world, right?
A director of a movie? I don't think so, because as I was defining last time, I'm fine with authority outside of authoritarian social relations, which can take various forms. It really just matters if people have free association, and also that depends on the context. Because, like, for example, in a market society, I don't necessarily have free association to leave from the job I'm at because I might not have a opportunity to feed myself, house myself, etc.
Right.
But in a needs-based economy, which is what I advocate, if I opt out of the relation, I have my needs met, and I can join another relation that makes sense
Okay.
for me and the other people.
All right, I get you. All right, so in the case of anarcho-capitalism, what we're espousing is essentially that you have the options to do a plethora of different things. You can be part of a group that has needs-based solutions, that they make sure that nobody has to fear of having a want for food, for shelter, for their children to be cared for, things of that nature. All right, all these things are available to you in a variety of different ways.
And they're available because in the free market, monopoly is minimized, competition is maximized, and therefore it is very difficult, if not impossible, to corner the market on the supply of a good. So if you're in the need for housing, there will always be some choice for you. Right?
Okay. Can I make a point on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, this is something that I often find very problematic when it comes to talking with ANCAPs, is they'll say, oh, well, the market minimizes monopoly because, it incentivizes competition.
Yeah.
You know, it's based off of competition and, you know, all of that. And so I don't think that that's a proper analysis. So for one thing, the market is it's a form of an overarching property scheme, right? So it's not just, you know, I trade a Tic Tac for a pen with my friend in some abstract town in the middle of nowhere, right? It's an overarching system of property norms.
It's a norm. Yeah. It's a societal norm that we accept that
Right.
you own the fruits of your labor.
Right. Well, I mean, the market doesn't have to be like that. There are markets that don't abide by that rule, but whatever.
The one
So,
we as Palace does.
well, the one that you advocate does, but I'm talking about markets in general right now. So,
Right. It's the norm.
so I'm just trying to describe markets in general. So markets in general are comprised of overarching property schemes, and people trade their property on the market for other property. And so what you have there is monopoly in itself. If I have exclusive rights of monopoly control over a given object, then there's a monopoly in itself. So the market itself is based on using monopoly, like using the leverage you have that comes with the monopoly over resources to make other people trade with you, right? So if I could, you know, go out and just attain some food right now, I would do it, but I can't because people have the monopoly on control over food, and thus I have to give them money for food.
You're misusing the term monopoly now.
Yeah, right. So that they have a monopoly on the food. So then there's
You can't go to the market and buy
It's
seeds.
not a monopoly on the food because you've got other sources that you can get your food from, and
You can grow it yourself. Why don't
maybe
you go to the
not
market?
everybody has the gardening skills to do that. Not everybody has access.
You can't go to YouTube and acquire those.
Not a lot of people. I mean, you know,
You can't. That's impossible for you to do. Or you have other things
The
that are
world
better.
don't have access to
Gaga,
YouTube.
who does not have running water, much less internet, cannot really do that.
Do you
But
work?
The point is,
No,
if
do you work? It's because I'm asking this is because you have an
Can you,
alternative.
let
to
me
gardening.
finish the argument so that you don't like strawman it 50 times like you've been doing it this whole time?
You just keep introducing.
Kenji, chill.
Like,
Jake,
you need to take a chill pill, dude. Seriously.
all right. Jake, please continue.
Right. So what I was just saying is that before I was, you know, I'll briefly talk on the point that you bring up, and then I'll go on with my point.
All right.
So if we're saying, okay, well, you can just get it somewhere else, first of all, there's a finite number of resources in the world, so I may not be able to get it somewhere else if they're, you know, depending on the, you know, the, how big, you know, or how many resources I have a monopoly on, what kind of resources I have a monopoly on. And also, there's the fact that that specific resource there is a monopoly on. So whether I can get the same resource somewhere else, that specific resource.
Jake,
is,
can you
under
define monopoly for me?
Dude, let me explain.
You keep using the word monopoly. I don't know your definition of it.
I'm serious. Just
You know what monopoly means. You're just trying to have.
Not in the way you're using it. I'd like
Alright.
you to explain the way you're using it.
All
Because
right,
that's not the way it is.
just hang out and listen, please, Kenji.
Jesus. All right. So that's what so that's that. And then there's also the fact that any system where, you know, like the market, where instead of, you know, so instead of us collectively convening and planning economic life, you know, directly, what is happening is that economic life is planned out through random exchanges between individuals. And so what happens there's an actual trend towards monopoly because resources accumulate in certain pockets of society when you have that random trading off, and that encourages corruption, which leads to people being incentivized to dominate other people, and and the property schemes themselves, you know, entail that corruption because there's unequal power relations, and so what happens is you have a system that actually trends towards monopoly rather than, you know, breaks it down and minimizes it. So that's the point I was trying to make.
All right, so let's look at a couple of things. All right, claiming that someone having exclusive ownership or control over a toothbrush, for example, does not give them a monopoly over toothbrushes. It gives them a monopoly over that toothbrush. And similarly, I have a monopoly over Robert Kruger. I am the only Robert Kruger. That is me. You know, and even if there was a clone of me who had the same knowledge and the same, you know, physical characteristics and everything, I'm still I'm Robert Kruger Prime, and he's Robert Kruger Subprime or 2 or 3 or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I have anything that resembles when we're talking about a monopoly as a real effect. Right now, then you also go on to the idea that there's these random exchanges. Well, it's not random. Okay, there's people are pursuing their own interests, and they will make trades that they believe will benefit themselves or the things that they want, the things that they're interested in. So if I'm a person who finds that the sole purpose of my life is to be magnanimous, the things that I do and the actions that I take will be towards that end. And so I will do those things that help achieve those ends, and I will seek them. All right, these are not random actions. All right, now if we live in a society where we pursue as an end, as a culture, conspicuous consumption, ostentatiousness, this being able to be superior to others because I've got wonderful boob job and great hair and an expensive vehicle and so on as being the number one most important thing in our lives, then yes, you can start to see that those things can be created and the market will bring those things about for those people who are willing to put in their efforts towards those ends, and they will satisfy those ends. Some people are like that. Some people are actually more, they desire to have things that are more communal, that they want to see those things prosper, that they want to have a society where if somebody's house is on fire, it's put out, and thus we come together and we make a market for fire insurance, which would basically be like fire departments.
Right.
And so there are groups that come together to provide those services. Some groups are going to be better than others, and this is where the competition comes in. It's a competition to see who can cooperate to provide what it is that people want better.
Compete and cooperate.
So,
What's that? Hagbard?
Oh, I said compete and cooperate, because although cooperation is one mechanism for competing within a market, competition's another mechanism.
Oh, yes, it's absolutely a competition to see who can provide the services that are demanded by the society best.
But the buyer-seller relationship's a form of competition as well as cooperation, because they're competing to see what price, because they're both trying to maximize their self-interest there.
Yeah, absolutely.
In regards to the claim Kenshi made about monopoly not coming from competition, monopoly is a strategy, and I would really say oligopoly is the better term for it. Oligopoly and a monopoly-esque system is a strategy for competition, even if it winds up inhibiting people's ability to compete with them. A great way to compete is to inhibit somebody else's ability to compete with you, and that goes into the incentive system to use the state.
That's too costly without the state. I think we'll both kind of agree with that, right, Hagbard? Without the state, that action of trying to stop the guy from competing with you is much too expensive.
Not necessarily.
I think you can prove that it kind of is, but
it's too expensive for the little guy, not for the oligarchs.
Let me just talk about the natural mechanisms in a free market that erode monopoly, right? Monopoly, if you let's say you temporarily have a monopoly or some type of control of a big portion of the market, that increases price, right? Naturally, increasing price and profits will bring more competition. So you see the self-correcting mechanisms.
So
there's self-correcting mechanisms here.
All right, so let me clarify what you're saying there. All right, if let's say, for example, I corner the market on providing fuel, all right, and I jack up the price in order to take advantage of my the market that I've cornered. Because I'm making these additional profits, these high levels of benefits, whether they be monetary or whatever. I mean, I'm gaining so much from this particular thing. Everyone else can see, hey, wow, this guy is just getting so much out of this situation that he has. I want some of that. And therefore, they will be incentivized to jump in to try to take away his excessive profits and make them their own.
But he has
So,
the better ability, comparative advantage-wise, cost efficiency-wise, to produce the cheapest goods because he's starting, he or
Oh,
she or
sure.
whatever is starting out with all these resources, and that's that natural
Absolutely.
tendency. That's that tendency towards centralization of wealth that
Okay.
you see within a
Now
market
let me
system.
respond to that. All right. So let's say that you've got a guy who he
Um,
creates all the refinery stuff. He's got
uh,
all these the stuff that goes up behind the scenes that is necessary in order to refine fuel. All right. He's already established this infrastructure and he's got it all set up and he's way ahead of the new entrepreneur who might want to come and jump in. Now, at this point, he can jack up the prices because he can undercut anybody else. Well, that's the problem. As soon as he jacks up the prices to a point where it is beyond the cost of actually creating a totally new system to do the same thing and sell it at a lower price, he can't go any higher because if he goes to that point and then higher, it now becomes cost effective for somebody else to compete. All right, so there are barriers to entry for it, whatever it happens to be, but you can't charge prices that are beyond what that barrier to entry is. If
So
so
you,
that
you're
barrier would change at different
so
times,
you're
correct?
so you're
what's that?
saying that over time, if somebody has a monopoly over a market, when they raise their prices too high, that's gonna make it profitable for somebody else to join in and compete with them because
Right.
they'll get more of the market share than that other person would with their high prices.
They'll get less.
No, but it'll be more appealing for somebody to buy from them rather than the dude who has the high prices.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't
Okay.
that still have a tendency towards oligopoly?
Well, actually, if you look at the game theory and the prisoner's dilemma, and you look at what cartels do, the there's
No, the equal. Let me answer this. The equilibrium is that the most efficient that you're good at, the most efficient good you're the best at producing at, you'll wind up producing. So society in a whole will be the most efficient. That's
that's not what he's talking about. So let me answer what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you have
it doesn't matter oligopoly, right?
okay,
Oli-
let me answer it. All right. In an oligopoly type of situation, an oligopoly is essentially a cartel where you have multiple different providers of a product or service that are conspiring together in order to jack up prices beyond what the normal costs would be. All right, the marginal utility cost. Right. Now, what you see if you look at the prisoner's dilemma and the choices that they have the choice to defect and sell and undercut their competitor who they're in business with, or they can stay with the cartel and maintain their prices. Now, the instant that they defect, they're going to receive a huge market share, an increase in profits that are going to be amazing. All right, so yes, they're going to get a temporary boost, and everybody, all the rest of them, are going to drop their prices and then compete with them. All right. Well, they've already gotten the first initial boost that nobody else had. They now have more money to reinvest into their business in order to create new efficiencies and become even better, and still continue to take advantage of their new position compared to everybody else. Now, if they do it, they benefit. All right. If they don't, then you've got another question. Did anybody else do it? All right. If nobody does it, if absolutely zero people do it, if nobody breaks with the cartel, their profitability will be at at a certain level. All right. If one person breaks with it and it's not you, then your profitability drops, so you lose. If you do it and nobody else does, then you win. All right. If you look at all the different potential options that they have, defecting has the net sum profit to it. The only time that you don't get a net gain is if absolutely nobody breaks with the cartel. And the probability of that for every single one of these people to not break with the cartel when would be beneficial to them to do so it's not going to happen.
Well, I'm not saying that the market doesn't like fluctuate because I agree that it changes the rulers, but there's consistently an oligopoly class, and an oligopoly you defined it in an interesting way. you defined it in regards to collusion as a defining factor. I would say that that's more of a result of it, whereas the factor that defines oligopoly is rule by a few sellers, not necessarily colluding with each other.
Yeah,
and I think that oligopolies will arise when you have an economic hierarchy ladder. The basic incentive to maximize profit at the expense of anything and everything, as a mechanism to ration resources. When you have that kind of incentive system, you will rig the market. And that's my basic and my basic point I'm trying to make is that the incentives within the market incentivize the rigging of the market as a mechanism to compete better and to maximize profit.
Oh, sure. There's definitely an incentive to try to get some sort of leg up on your competitor by using, let's say, for example, the state. In fact, if you don't use the state to take advantage of your competitor, then you're doing yourself and your investors and your stockholders and your employees a disservice, because you're not playing on, you're not using the tools that are available to you to become profitable. And the thing that's really important about this is profitability does not necessarily mean the holy dollar. All right, profitability may mean that we can take time off and enjoy ourselves. That we don't have to work as many hours in a day is being profitable. That and so on. That we have better working.
I'm defining it as monetary profit in regards to economics, not in regards to the other definition of profit is like any gain in life that could be like relaxing. I'm trying to monetary profit as opposed to monetary loss.
Some people value cash as the thing that they want to profit from, but some people value time instead. So they may seek to take their profits in the form of time off in vacations, and you'll see that actually in a lot of very wealthy people, is that they take a lot of time off and they don't work as much.
That's the way they might use their profit. I agree that they might use their profit to do that for
absolutely.
sure.
So, so the thing is, let me finish on this point. Is that when you have a society that does not accept the concept of creating a system that can violate the norm of I will not take your stuff from you without your permission. All right. If you have a society that expects that people's property rights will be respected, that they accept that there is no special rules for a group of people called government, creation of such an institution becomes financially impossible, because you can't change everybody's mind to think that way.
Well, one could create a very small-scale state as well as collude with other oligopoly groups or other economic hierarchs to create a state. It doesn't necessarily need to come from one cartel alone. And what you could see is the heads of different industries might get together and say, hey, it'll be good for us. Let's cooperate with each other as a mechanism to maximize profit by creating a state. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be a state. They could create something like it. They could have their own private army that could be used for nefarious ends.
You know how expensive a private army is?
It's very expensive, but the oligarchs have a lot of money. I mean, the thing is, taxation isn't the only way to extract surplus value from people. You can extract surplus value.
Stop using that term, please.
Why do you want me to stop using that term? It's
just an emotionally charged term.
It's an emotionally charged term that doesn't exist.
Emotionally charged. That's great.
All right.
I agree. I think the word anarchism is very emotionally charged. It means chaos to most people. I think
surplus value doesn't necessarily mean you don't have simultaneous benefits between the two transactions. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about this. I wanted to talk about the supply of a market of a good. So the supply, of course, when you have a finite amount of people, that implies a finite amount of suppliers, right? So oligopolies and monopolies don't necessarily need to price collude, right? So the economic argument against oligopolies and monopolies is that there are few suppliers relative to a free more competitive market where the price would be higher for the consumer, and there's a net dead weight loss to society. There's not necessarily price collusion. And what Robert said earlier is that whenever you have the logical conclusion and mathematically that people when you take into account the self-interest and profitability principle, it will lead firms to cheat when they try to price collude. So every time you try to get together and try to price collude, the long run tendency is for them to cheat and the collusion to fail. So that's
Yeah.
But okay, but as
All
far
right. Now,
as
let me go to Jake. I want to get Jake's input.
All right. Sorry, I was eating, but like I just wanted to go back to the thing you said about my argument before,
Okay.
because I'm interested in that discussion. So basically, like I'll just run through, get your argument really quick, just so like I don't forget anything.
Okay.
So your argument basically was, right, that number one, I was making an error in categorizing it as random because the exchanges are taking place via people's interests and via what people are wanting to do. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, and also, what was the other thing? I forget the other thing.
All right. Well, these are purposeful actions that are decisions that are
Right.
seeking ends, and these goal seeking will result in different types of trades. And if we have goals that tend to be associated with a societal benefit, then we will achieve societal benefits. If we have a society that is made up of people that have goals that are selfish and opulence oriented, and
Right.
then we'll see satisfaction of those types of interest.
So you're saying that it depends on the attitudes and the self-interests of people.
It depends on what their goals are, what their desires
Right.
are, what they want.
Right. Okay. So I get you. All right. So I guess what I would apply to that is I think you're taking the word random and extrapolating it to something that doesn't really fit. So what we mean when we say random, right, is we mean that it has a large degree of spontaneity, right? So nothing in this world is completely random, and the definition of random takes that into account, right? So because everything has a cause and an effect and all of that, right?
We don't know that.
I don't know that. Okay.
We don't know that for sure. I mean, as far as we understand it, yes.
Well, as far as we understand, I'm just using like modern science and like modern things we understand, right? I know that could change. That's certainly true, but I'm just using like our understanding as it fits now.
Our understanding of anything could change, though, in regards to when we use induction, so it doesn't say much.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we have to do that in discussion, just go off of what we understand, right? So
there could be an invisible pink unicorn behind you. That could, and you don't know it. New evidence could prove it in theory.
So move on, Jake.
Yeah, right. So what I was going to say is, like, it just means that we have a degree of spontaneity, is my point, or a large degree. And so what happens in the market is instead of things being directly coordinated, you have basically exchanges on a fairly small, spontaneous basis. So, an economic transaction occurs that way. So instead of us, getting together and saying, all right, well, this person needs X amounts of this person wants X amounts of this, and then allocating that according to, certain principles that we have,
I got you. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Instead of that happening, what actually happens is that we have random kind of exchanges. So when I go out to the store and I buy, let's say, some beef jerky or something, I'm not necessarily taking into account, where this beef jerky was made, by whom it was made, the morality, the moral perspective that it has, the moral perspective that it has.
There's a lot of stuff that goes into the production of the beef jerky and so on. So basically,
so I'm not done with my point though. My point is that because of this degree of spontaneity, market exchanges are fairly random, and so
they're not random. They're governed by prices. You're minimizing. You're taking into account all those factors.
You really need to calm down.
You're taking into account price. You're taking into account location.
Let him finish. Let him finish, Kenji.
He's
Okay, I got it. I understand. We'll address it, but we're running out of time. So
like you can tell me that I'm a stupid commie or whatever after I finish my argument.
Right. So, sorry.
So
like what I'm just trying to say is that because of the spontaneity of economic coordination, what ends up happening is that in pockets of society you have resources accumulating instead of being equalized, because that's what happens when you have this kind of
Price coordinates, man.
ex-
If
you know,
it if a good if a, wait let me if a good accumulates in an area,
I can
the price will go down. The price will.
The price will go down. I understand. Now let me make my argument. All right. So this is what I'm trying to say, is that because of this coordination of resources, this specific coordination, we're going to have resources accumulating in random pockets of society, and thus we're going to have a trend towards monopolies. Also, there is the fact that the market itself is based on unequal power relations because of the property scheme and part of it, and because of that, the resources accumulating in those pockets. So what happens is we have and unequal power relations incentivize more monopoly as they incentivize they attract more corruption. That gives incentive for people to dominate other people and all of this. So what essentially I'm saying is that the market, rather than being a monopoly breaking mechanism, is a monopoly creating mechanism, and is responsible, is responsible for a lot of the monopolies that we see today, and is actually responsible for a lot of the government intervention that we see today.
And I'm going to disagree with you, obviously. So let me clarify as to why I disagree. All right. First of all, the idea that the maneuvering of different wealth and so on due to the market having random flows is not accurate. What happens is that as a person becomes more and more successful and more wealthy, they have an incentive to enjoy the fruits of their wealth. They are going to want to go on trips and on vacations, to have parties with their friends, to drink and be merry, all right, because they've got this excess, all right? And so this money, when spent in these different ventures, adventures, is a loss for them. They will have those monies go downhill. Now, you'll notice that in the past, with obviously we still have government, and it's screwing up things, and we can't really, but we have to look at as best we can. There have been a lot of different families that have had wealth, and then from rags to riches to rags. You've heard that phrase before, right? The way that the market actually works does not create such amazing wealth disparities that you're seeing today, unless you have a state that can be manipulated into causing barriers to entry that force other institutions from being able to compete with you. Okay, if the Walton family didn't have their law-making buddies available to them at their beck and call, they couldn't exclude other companies from coming into China, for example, and offering other people that are living there in squalor more money to do the job, that they would like to see done, because obviously there's a huge amount of profit being made by Walmart. Okay, if Walmart's profits were very, 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 very low, then there wouldn't be any potential opportunity for other people to come in and offer more money. There is that potential because they're making lots and lots of money. We know that they're making lots and lots of money. So they're taking advantage of the government in China in order to restrict free trade and market forces from doing what they would do, which would be to lower the amount of excess profits that Walmart is getting, and to distribute it amongst a large number of different providers of different products that would like to work together with the people who are available for laboring. Right? So this wealth disparity thing, yes, there will be wealth disparity. Yes, absolutely there will be, because some people work harder than others. Right? Some people know, some people put their minds to what it is that they're doing instead of just, spending their money on, frivolities.
Yeah, I understand.
Right? So it doesn't create this huge disparity of wealth, and it certainly doesn't create a huge disparity of wealth in an unfair fashion. It rewards people who do the things that people demand, the things that people want.
Okay, so my reply to that is going to be fairly long-winded, and I don't know if you have the time for that. So,
Okay.
I have something
Well,
quick to say.
okay, go for it.
All
And we've
right,
got
so we
like
we heard
5 seconds.
I have 5 seconds. Okay, I heard two interesting perspectives. One is that the market's governed by price, and the other is that there's a certain degree of randomness. I would say that both have truth to them in the sense that the market is governed by price and profit and cost efficiency as a mechanism for that. However, the randomness comes in the sense that we can't really account for the inputs, which could be hundreds of years of dead labor and creating ideas and towns and technology. And we can't really account for the externalities and the outputs, which include workers having a lack of decision-making power within the fields that they work, and that their decisions can be vetoed at any time by the people at the top of their pyramid. They don't have true free association to join another association without being subject to economic coercion via market pressures. And the other externalities that humans are for sale because the basic necessities of life are for sale. So now humans are for buying and selling and renting within the workforce. Resource efficiency and technical efficiency is sacrificed at every stage of production that it makes sense to maximize profit. And then there's wealth concentration, which leads to stress on all levels of society, stress being connected to just about every single disease that we know of. The greater the wealth inequality, the greater the stress on all levels, the greater the diseases. So those are just some of the externalities, not even all of them. So in that sense, there are uncalculated externalities, and there's always going to be uncalculated externalities. The real question is, how can we minimize the harm that we cause?
Okay, and the way that I would say that we minimize the harm is by accepting that spontaneous order actually produces a better result than directed order, and that's I guess the final point that I'm going to make on the anarchist experience today. I do want to thank all of you for joining and coming in to discuss things with us. I'm sorry that we got kind of into a quagmire of you know, terminology and so on. We're going to go ahead and try to avoid that in the future, and you definitely
Hopefully it's better next time.
So yeah, we'll have a little more back and forth and discussions on you know, without having to go through terminology. In any case, to everyone who has been watching, thank you for watching the Anarchist Experience. Our typical format is more of a you know, one-on-one or 2v2 kind of situation, and the more back and forth. So we're going to have that coming up next week. Again, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we look forward to having you then. Take care. Bye bye.